Hello, welcome to Agile World. And today, for a change, we have Sabrina.
Oh yeah, I came back. I haven't run away yet.
No, it's a shock. And we also have our guest, Ash. How are you doing, Ash?
I'm good. Thanks for asking and thanks for having me.
Well,
Okay.
I felt I owed you something after the last month.
You two have been busy, busy bees. We're glad to actually still have you around. So thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Yep, that's great. So we're kind of doing this differently moving forwards and getting guests in. So Ash is one of our first real guests. Everyone else before this was related to the festival. But I just wanted to start off, Ash, how did you get into Agile? How did you hear about it? Why?
Yeah, I always remember a story. I was going through various trainings, and as you do as a contractor, you see what's the latest and greatest in the contract world, and the world Agile and Scrum kept popping up. And I thought I better get myself trained. And so went along to Learning Tree, got a dedicated 4-day training course, and at the end of it, didn't know enough anyway. So I thought I might as well try it out on some of the projects I was working on, and that's where the real learning started. And I would say I'm still learning.
Okay, I heard a rumor from January from a nameless source that said you thought that Agile would be easier than working for a living.
Yeah, well,
That
the
was you. So, is it easier than coding and being a developer? And
So, how it all started off was I used to think, okay, I'm doing all this development, which is millions of lines of code. So, I can see the project manager doing less. And then the Scrum Master just turns up once in a blue moon. So, let's learn how to be a Scrum Master. So, started my PSM 1, 2, and 3 journey, which started last year, and I finished PSM 3 this year. And uh, my experience has taught me that people who make it look easy are actually really good at it, and that's how they make it look easy, and it's not actually easy.
Do you know what? I can sympathize with you because obviously I'm an agile coach, but I also love being a scrum master. And when you're actually having a really good time and you get it, it does look simple, but it's not because you're on your feet constantly, you're busy, and you're coordinating and facilitating everything. But it's absolutely that's what attracted me to agile was the scrum master role because it was a really really fun role, especially if you kind of get it, you get the mindset, you get the theory, you get how to work with teams and work with people. It's an absolutely joy to do, and I'm of
Absolutely.
awe of you, the fact you've done all three. I said this to you in person, but I'm in awe of you, the fact that you are 1 in 1,000 people to get your PSM 3. Did I call it 3? Yeah, 3.
Yeah, 3.
That's absolutely amazing. And you've even I now feel like I need to, we spoke about this earlier before we recorded, I now need to challenge you because I now feel I need to get all 3 because I'm a very competitive person.
maybe I should get a qualification.
Might help you, Karl.
Yeah. So in retrospect, it's not as easy as it looks then, Ash.
No. Anything worth achieving is not easy, and anything easy is not really worth it.
Yep,
Really
absolutely.
good work.
Have you got any good war stories from doing Scrum and Scrum Master?
So the best story was the one that my teacher told me, and it was where um, they had various projects failing from time to time, various production issues, and the big guys in the management got together and said, Okay, here's all the production issues, the biggest ones that got our stuff totally out of whack. So, what happened here? And project manager said, we had a release. So they said, okay, there's a release and you had a production issue. Then they go on to the next one. They said, what happened here? They said, oh, we had a production release there. He said, okay, another production release and another big issue. So they go on to the next one and they say, what happened here? They said, oh, we had a release there. I said, okay, so whenever there is a release, we seem to have production issues. So best thing to do is just stop making any releases.
What?
That's an accountant's response, isn't it?
By
Yeah.
far, it's the funniest thing I've ever heard. Well, let's just not release anymore, and then we won't have any.
Well, they don't understand what that is, clearly. If their management outside of the area, they're looking at it going, well, that's causing problems. We can stop it. But they don't actually understand the implication of stopping doing dev. That's hilarious.
How did you respond to that? How would you respond to that?
So that's when the agile thing comes into play, where you start making small releases and you manage what you're releasing much better so that you don't have any production incidents. And also, sometimes what tends to happen is when you're carrying a lot of legacy, then doing sufficient testing or accurate testing becomes very difficult. And then when you don't test, then you're going to fail, because anything that you don't test will fail in production. So, doing small releases and doing sufficient testing is what's going to prevent production issues.
Fair enough. What's your view on test-driven development? Because many people think that TDD is a very good fit with Agile, but it doesn't fit with all people.
I don't think it's practical for every scenario, every situation. I would love to do it all the time, but sometimes you think, okay, I will just do a POC, and then you think, oh shit, I've written 1,000 lines of code, and then I need to do some tests now. And then you go back and you think, oh my God, my cyclomatic complexity for a particular function is 16. I need to reduce it before I can test it properly. So it's a good way to do testing. It's a good way to do development. It just takes a lot of discipline. And if you don't do it, then you'll obviously come to regret it.
Yeah. Well, and if Agile hadn't come along, if we just stayed with extreme programming, do you think we'd be better at delivering products?
So neither Agile nor XP nor anything else actually helps you deliver. What helps you deliver is writing or doing things the right way, in the right spirit, the first time. If you don't do them the right way, then no matter how agile you pretend to be, you'll never deliver anything sufficiently well. You'll pretend to be agile, but you'll be fragile.
Oh no, you said it. You said the word.
That's my
Oh,
favorite statement.
I hate that word fragile. People know me will use it just to frustrate. But no, I get what you're saying. And to add to that, it's also listening to people. I find with a lot of development teams, they're dictated to that you've got to write this code in a certain way or write it in these little boxes, because in a deliverer's head they feel that this is how it should be done and this is how it should be released, when a developer or the people that are actually working on it know which format and which way it should be. And it's when they're not listened to either.
Yeah, basically, what will happen is you'll have a lot of people who don't plan or don't plan sufficiently well, and then they use words like agile to hide behind, and they hide their mismanagement or lack of planning behind words like agile, and they will say, oh, we don't know what we are doing in the next sprint. We are just concentrating on this sprint. But in reality, You always have sprint zero where you know what you're looking to deliver in each sprint. And fair enough, there will be changes as you deliver. The product owner will come along and say, okay, can we change something in the next sprint, which is fine, but you can't have zero planning. You always have to have some kind of a roadmap. You always have to have this vision, a strategy, a plan, because otherwise it's like getting into a car and saying, okay, I'm just going to get into the car and let's see where we end up. You have to have a destination in mind.
So, what do I have a magic word when I'm a Scrum Master to deal with management trying to change things. It's no.
Can you say that? Can you say the magic word? Are we allowed? Or are you going to have to
It's no. The answer is no.
Okay.
If we're in a sprint, the answer's no. If we're in a planning phase, the answer is possibly, but we need to look at the implications.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff that managers need. They need to be trained to be agile, working with agile teams. They think they obtain it by osmosis. They just, by being in a room with something that's agile, they understand it. What advice have you got to product owners who are wanting to actually have a valuable impact in agile?
So, what you have to understand is most people like to please people, and most people don't like to look bad. But at the end of the day, as a product owner, you have to understand what is going to add value to your product. And if you are going to constantly interrupt the development, then you are going to cause a lot of, um, I would say, first of all, friction, then secondly, expense, then sometimes agile can be quite expensive because you have a lot of resources on site at the same time, whereas sometimes waterfall can be, and I mean, I'm being um, a little bit bad for the agile world here by saying that waterfall can sometimes be better, but sometimes you have to be pragmatic as to what approach will work for a particular project. Now, coming back to your question, as a product owner, what you have to think about is you have hired some of the sharpest people. um, when you were interviewing people, you got the best team together, so you have to trust your own judgment, um, and know that the people you have hired are some of the best people. So if you just let them get on with their work, then they will deliver. The only reason they won't deliver is if you did not know what you wanted to begin with. So
Yeah.
if a product owner does not know what he wants and is constantly going to change his or her mind, then that is going to cause a lot of delays, a lot of expensive projects, and they have to think: is this money? What would I do if this money was coming out of my pocket? Would I still be doing this?
That's a very good point of reference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I seem to have monopolized the conversation. Sabrina, do you want to speak as well?
No, I have been speaking. I have been speaking. No, I was just going to say that I relate to you in everything that you're actually saying, because I think you're 100% true in what you're actually saying. And it's actually some of the problems that a lot of people do experience and maybe even get turned off by Agile because of these issues. And also the fact that a lot of people fear that sometimes when you're working on a project as a team, sometimes you will get, including your product owner, you'll get into a situation where you're like, hang on a minute, what are we doing here? You get into a bit of a pickle, you get a bit discombobulated. And a lot of people are actually scared to actually say, hang on a minute, let's just stop. Let's just stop for a moment and go, let's look at what we're doing so far. Let's look at, are we actually working towards the original vision, the original goal? And actually, is that original vision or goal really somewhere where we want to be? Has circumstances changed? And a lot of teams and product owners are scared to just go, hang on a minute, let's stop for a moment. Let's talk about this. Let's think about it. And they can often drift off to a completely different direction and then have to be revert and pulled back. And as soon as you were saying that's the first thing that it popped up into my head, which is a common thing that happens. And it's actually a turn off for a lot of companies and a lot of teams to actually work agile.
So the question is, why are people scared to stop? Is it because maybe they are too busy pretending to be busy? And if they suddenly stop, then maybe they will get found out? Or are they actually in a state where they actually can't relax, they can't stop, they can't pause? And it may be actually a psychological issue than a systems issue.
Yeah. Or a fear of time. If you think of a lot of projects that a lot of teams work on, there are a start, beginning, and end. And normally the end does have a date. And it's really hard to get away from a dictated date, but we still need one to know what we're working towards. And I found personally, when you're asking a team to stop, the first fear and the first question they come up with, well, hang a minute, we have a date that we need to work towards. But what some teams don't realize is stopping for that moment, whether it's 1, 2, 3 days or a week, to collaborate together, make sure you're all going the same direction, make sure we are going the same direction, means that timescales may be elongated slightly, or you may actually speed up because you're all working together and you all understand the same vision, you all agree with it, and you sprint, and they just get sprinting. But sometimes I find personally it's the fear of time.
So what happens is many times people are asked for estimates, and the estimates are a finger in the air estimate. But before you know it, it's hard and fast. You have to deliver by that time. And the first time someone is asked to prepare an estimate, they will give a really honest estimate, and then they are held at gunpoint to deliver to that. So they become a bit wiser. Next time they may give a little bit fluid estimate. They may add a little bit of contingency in there. But if you take these estimates and say you have to deliver by this date because you said you'll deliver by this date, then that is uh, not the right thing to do. And secondly, to have that date in your mind and constantly drive yourself mad about it is also going to cause a poorer product. Whereas if you say, okay, I want to deliver and I think I'm going to have a delay here, and the delay is because I did not cater for life, because life throws you curveballs all the time. And you think, okay, I'm going to take these things into account. And now let's see what we need to change. And then let's revisit the plan to see where we think we will deliver. Then that would be a better way of doing it for the betterment of the product and also for the mental health of everyone in the team. Because you can keep driving people to the wall, up the wall, whatever, but at the end of the day, then you'll not have a good enough product. And also your team, as soon as the product is delivered, they will think of leaving, and that's not where you want to be.
So Agile itself doesn't have a concept of time; it has a concept of complexity. And this is one of my bugbears. You play points poker if you're going to do it right, and that's a complexity calculation, not a time. But people always want to turn those points into days. And that's exactly where it goes wrong, because actually complexity estimated is not complexity in reality. So actually, once you get in and dig around and do your due diligence and your research as a developer around what the real complexity is, you might find out that it's a much bigger level of complexity that needs to be broken down into more stories. So I think there's a bit where Agile has made its own failure point by accepting time as a measure instead of forcing the issue around complexity. But I think we can still save the day by actually pushing back and saying, look, being agile is about delivering usable products. We don't necessarily deliver what the business wants. We deliver what the business needs. And that's how you get past this notion of time. But it's really interesting you saying about no one wants to stop. I've been brought into major projects and I said, right, everyone stop. And they're like going, what do you mean everyone stop? I said, you've got 200 developers building the wrong thing. Because
I bet they panic. I bet
they did panic.
They panic.
It was a .NET development. It's not like something you could easily change after the fact. So they built all the containers and they built the whole architecture for the wrong product because they hadn't read the requirements. They thought they could go through chapter of requirements after chapter, and the chapters would build the product, but that wasn't the way the requirements were written. So you had to read all the requirements first to understand the architecture of the product, and then you build it. And I was the only person that read the whole requirements document.
And basically, isn't that where you enforce some kind of a sprint where you are just going to familiarize yourself with what
Sprint Zero.
You want? Sprint Zero, and you bring in the product owner and get them to define what they actually want done without developers saying, okay, I've read the first paragraph and I know what the book is all about. Uh, and I'm just going to go off on one and design everything in .NET, whereas perhaps PHP would have been a better solution, or Java would have been a better solution. And sometimes I've even seen people just using a technology so that they can get that technology on their CV.
Yes, see that too. I saw that a lot with PHP people when PHP became the thing, and then it was Ajax briefly. But I was the actual system, because it was a government system. It was a .NET they had to use. But I've actually done 3 sprint zeros, not one, because we were working on an incremental system. I said, look, the end of this sprint zero was still not ready. We'll have to do another one. And it should have seen the faces of people, because they just think that Agile is a magic bullet, and it's not. It's unless you get the foundations right, you may as well not bother, because you're going to waste millions.
Yeah, because most teams or many teams just do a 2-week waterfall. That's not agile. That's just smaller waterfalls.
Yeah.
100%. Karl, we're now going into, we did a series, we have to do it again actually. We did a recording about a month ago about the agile myth, and I think we need to carry on that series, because yes, this magic bullet, this special silver bullet seems to be appearing a lot. And you've just brought up as well about we think we're doing agile, but actually we're doing waterfall in 2-week increments. That's a common thing that happens. We're sprinting because
it's a really good way to describe it, because I've never heard it put that way, but it is absolutely true. We don't have requirements. We're going to make them up because we're iterative. And I'm like going, what? Are we building an ironing board or a jumbo jet? You don't even know. And then we're going to iterate. So we'll have a 2-day planning session for a £10 million build. And I'm going, what? Would you do that with your own money?
So what have you got coming up next then? So what have you got next coming up for you, Ash? What are you doing at the moment, and what's your next steps? You've done all these wonderful things.
So the lot of things happening in my personal life at the moment. I'm doing a lot of walking at the moment, which I find very therapeutic. Then I am diabetic, and I'm working on trying to reverse my condition. So walking to reduce weight, to reduce my blood sugar levels. And we will see how that goes. I'm giving it until the end of this year. A lot of things happening on that front. Then on work front, I'm looking for a new contract. Hope to make use of my new certifications of Scrum Master. And also, I've seen a lot of good Scrum Masters. I've also seen not so good Scrum Masters. And what I would like to do is do some make some use of my recent PSM3 certification, um, do some Scrum Mastery, uh, try and build some good products in hopefully under budget, because most projects seem to go over the estimate and over the budget, perhaps because they are not budgeted correctly, or their estimations are all entirely wrong. So my next challenge is to try and deliver a reasonably large project under budget.
That's a challenge.
Possible.
That, do you know what? We need to bring you back on, and we want to hear that you've been able to succeed. That's absolutely amazing. Well, thank you very much. Karl, have you got any other questions?
No, I'm just excited to hear your case study when you come back with it, and have educated a client that actually you can achieve fabulous outcomes with the right people in the right places, and in budget and on, well, relative time.
We're not going to go into time again. Well, thank you ever so much for your time tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we hope to have you back on soon to tell us what your other achievements and hopefully a white paper.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.